one will be about the cover packs, and I'm trying to tell you some new things. Maybe some of them you already know at this point, but hope that you will get some nice new points to sell the product to your country. And then this recording, it will be placed on our web e-learning portal after this webinar, probably in a couple of days. And this presentation, the PowerPoint presentation, you can download from our web portal already today. So I thought that we're going to start this presentation by looking at the definition of sterile barrier system. I think it's pretty important when we're talking about the cover packs. And the sterile barrier system, or SBS, is actually defined as a minimum package that minimizes the risk of ingress of microorganisms and allows aseptic presentation of the sterile contents at the point of use. So basically, what are the sterile barrier systems? They are sterilization pouches, wrapping materials, and even containers. So simply saying, the job of sterile barrier system has been done properly if it is keeping these items sterile from the sterilization department all the way to the operating room or other departments where they are used. And then it's not enough that it's only coming to this operating room, but it needs to be also opening nicely so that it's the actual product which is inside the package, it's not contaminated when it's opened, this bag. And it seems like quite simple job, but then actually the sterile barrier system, it needs to go through quite a hard journey on the way. So when it starts from CSSD or SPD, then there are different environments. In some hospitals, you just basically take the bag out of the autoclave or wrapped items out of the autoclave, you just place them on certain surface. And in some cases, the surface is clean. In some other cases, maybe not so clean. And then there are different storing places on the way before it's going to the operating room. And some of the storing places maybe look like here on the right side in this picture. So they are just simply putting the wrapped items even on their edges there and trying to find some space for those. But even in the, let's say, modern hospitals, the protocols, what are in use are always not perfect. So for example, here in the middle, you have a transportation trolley where you have a lot of peel pouches, and then those peel pouches are placed in the baskets, and then there is no cover at all on this tray or trolley. So basically, it's on the public corridor. Anybody could be touching them, maybe even putting holes on them if they wanted to. So the conditions all in a hospital and outside a hospital, they can really vary quite a lot, as you know. So weather is changing from season to season. It's very different from country to country. So for example, I know that in Middle East, it's quite often very hot, and there are even sandstorms that are coming there quite often. And then if you go to, let's say, Far East Asia, you might have rainy season, so it's raining all the time and the humidity is very high. Or in Canada, it might be snowing and it might be extremely cold at some point. Then of course, the road conditions as well, like, you know, where you're transporting the products, they might be varying a lot. So the roads might be good or they're not good. And all these might be affecting the sterile barrier system or the performance of the sterile barrier system. That we know, but we have to think about it. Then the sterile storages in the hospitals, they are often controlled, so the humidity and temperature are controlled. But even in very good university hospitals, you have sterile stores where there is no controlled air. So it really can change. The humidity over the year, it might change from day to day. or they have too little space, so they have to stack items like here in this picture. But then the biggest thing that is affecting the sterile barrier system and the functions of that is probably the human factors. So that has a really big effect on those. I have seen all kinds of things which I wouldn't like to see around the world. I have seen people even smoking in operating room. There are autoclaves in corridors under the stairs. There have been some, holes punched through the pouches just to hang them on somewhere. I have seen dirty packages taking to the sterile store and so on. A lot of different things. So basically all kinds of things can really happen. But even more commonly then it's like just the small things, like people who are touching the sterile barrier systems, are they touching them with clean hands? Are they perhaps piling the products like here on the picture on the left side? So if you're piling them on the trolley, is there a risk that maybe one item is dropping on the floor or something like this? Some people are tossing sterile or really like throwing around sterile items. What we are going to look at today is cover packs and then how these can improve the patient safety and reduce the operation costs in healthcare. And first thing there is that we're going to look at this, how these environment and conditions should be considered when choosing sterile barrier system or protective packaging to this. Then we're going to look at a little bit at our solution to those, the STERIKIng cover packs and how these are used. And then there are a little bit of calculations showing that how can we actually reduce the cost or the total cost of the end customers in a hospital if we are selling cover packs. So they need to buy more material, but they are saving some money when they are using the cover packs. First, we still need to go a little bit back to these basic questions and back to the healthcare facilities, because it's very, very important to understand that these conditions inside the hospital and outside the hospital can really greatly affect the sterile barrier system and its performance. So the package or packaging system that we are choosing need to be chosen according to these conditions which we are having in the hospital. And then each facility have to have a plan or documented education plan, how to store, how to handle, and how to transport these sterile items. And for that purpose, there are actually some guidelines that are existing. I took some of these points from ISO 16775, which is a standard, which is explaining how to interpret that and read ISO 11607, the standard for sterile barriers and the materials and the validations of those. And then the starting point there is that, of course, when we're choosing the material in the hospital, then we need to look first at what are the manufacturer recommendations for this material. So, for example, that if you're using this wrapping material or if you're using this pouch, then what is the recommended storing temperature or relative humidity that can be this sterile barrier system can be handling. And then if there are any restrictions for use for these products, then that would be needed to know. Then another thing that a hospital needs to look at is this education program for the staff who is handling these sterile barrier systems. And then this doesn't mean, of course, it doesn't mean only the people in sterile processing department, but it's also meaning the people who are transporting the devices. So do they really know what they are transporting? When they take it from one department to another, or they take it to another hospital do they understand where if they are touching it, then they need to have clean and disinfected hands? Is there a dress code? And then we need to ask also in the hospital that do we know the number of the times that we are touching the surface of the sterile barrier system? How many people are touching it on the way? Then during the transportation, there are a lot of things to consider. I've been listing only a couple of those, but basically we need to look, for example, this that is clean and sterile medical devices transported and stored separately from soiled medical devices. So, for example, if you have a truck driver taking from centralized sterilization services, if taking these sterile items to other hospitals, then is that truck dropping off sterile items to all of these hospitals, or are they also possibly picking some dirty items at the same time? And then is there a risk that they are mixed somehow? Then, as mentioned already before, then are these sterile items on the corridors, for example, covered? Are they kept in closed guards? Are compartments in the transportation trolleys cleaned and disinfected? Can these be locked and secured in public areas so that just anybody cannot go there and touch them or do some harm there if they wanted to? And then is this transport personnel also trained? So again, for example, that if this truck driver in the bottom is transporting sterile items and he's dropping the item on the floor of the truck, then what does he do? Is he just lifting it back, or is he taking it back to reprocessing? That kind of questions. There are more questions, of course, about this. Then about the storage. When we are in sterile storage, okay, is there like dedicated storage areas for sterile barrier systems? That should be looked at. And then kind of things like if they are using FIFO, like the first in, first out, so that those items which are sterilized first would be also used first or not. Is the dust-free environment? Are floors, shelves, baskets, are they cleaned regularly? Is there enough space in the stock? Can you pull out the trays from the cells without breaking the sterile barrier system? Can you avoid stacking the trays? Because once you're stacking them, they are breaking more, or you break the sterile barrier more easily. A lot of other things there as well, like is there enough space between floor and the sterile items, ceiling and the sterile items? Can you avoid sunlight? Can you avoid humidity, temperature, so on? A lot of different questions. And when hospital is asking these questions and people there are asking these questions from themselves, they often come to the conclusion that sterile barrier system alone is not always enough to provide proper protection against these conditions. So then in some cases you need to have protective packaging on top of this sterile barrier system. And when you combine these two, so SPS and protective packaging, then you will get a packaging system. That is according to ISO 11607, that is the term that is used, or definition for that, for those two. For example, if you combining cover pack, or you're putting actually wrapped and sterilized tray of instruments into the cover pack, you will get the packaging system. So then we get to the point now. So STERIKING cover packs, they are used together with wrapped trays, pouched items, and containers to keep extra protection when it is needed. So they protect sterile barrier system from breaking. It's protecting sterile items from microbes, dust, dirt, all kind of particulates and such, which could be contaminating then the sterile item. It's also protecting the barrier, so sterile barrier from high humidity and water, which is really important, because if you have water, then it will be going through the barrier sooner or later, and then allowing the microbe to go through the barrier as well. Cover bags are used really to improve patient safety, of course, and that's the main job of those. But then at the same time, you can also oftentimes extend the shelf life of wrapped items when using cover bags. Some people also say that it's easier to identify if there are any damages on the sterile barrier system if you have a cover bag on top of it. In STERIKING range, we have two types of cover bags. We have cover bags CP and SSDC. So CP is basically cover bag, and it's heat sealable version. And then SSDC is self-sealed dust cover bag, and then that is used if you don't have the sealing machine in the sterile side of the sterilization department. Both of these cover bag types are made from film that we call at VPAC ESE 1250, and it is the film that we're producing ourselves. It's a 9-layer structure. It's made from biaxially oriented polyester and polyethylene, and it's really, really very strong material. So if you would have in front of you that, I would ask you to really try to tear this down, because I would say it's almost impossible to tear it. Maybe not impossible, but it's very hard to tear it. It's really, really very strong material, and it's hard to tear it down. So it's protecting very well for these punctures, all kinds of when pulling them out, so abrasion and that kind of thing in the hospital. We have done biocompatibility studies for the film. We have also made the compatibility studies that is suitable for irradiation, E-beam and gamma sterilization. And the water and vapor transmission rates for that are very good. So they are actually about 10 times better than with typical low density polyethylene and polypropylene bags that are also seen sometimes used for cover bags. This is maybe not so important, I don't know. Okay, there are people from Europe also in this evening session. So basically, according to new medical device regulation in Europe, cover bags are not seen like medical devices or their accessories. So now, due to the MDR, we have to remove the CE mark from our cover bags, which we have had before. So that is more like an information to this. Otherwise, the products is going to stay the same, and argumentation, of course, stays the same as earlier. So in short, cover bag is protecting the barrier and the sterile item from dust, holes, abrasion, stains, insects, particulates, all kinds of things like that. It's good because it's transparent. You can see what is inside. So even if you have a label on sterilized bag, then you can see this label through the material very easily. Cover bag is extending the shelf life, as I told. It's water repellent. So if you even pour water on it, it's not going through. It's reducing the level of microbes on the sterile barrier system. It's peelable, so all of our cover bags are peelable, so you can easily open it without tearing anything. And it's quite, or actually even very easy to seal if you're using the sealer or self-seal. So self-seal pouch, it looks like this. There you have a liner in the bottom, when you use it, you just take the liner out and then you're folding it along the line, this green line there in the bottom to get it closed. And the advantage of this is that you don't need this sealer in the sterile side of the sterilization department. How do you use then cover packs? Well, important thing is that in hospital you don't put the cover pack in sterilization, but you actually use it after the sterilization. So you are washing, you're drying, you're maintaining, checking and assembling, packing the instruments normally, and then sterilizing them normally. And after the sterilization, you have to let the sterilized items to cool down so that condensate is not forming to the cover pack. And after cool down, you can put this wrapped item into the cover pack and seal it. So if you're using the sealer, well, then you seal it with the sealer. And then if you use the self-seal pack, then you just fold the plastic pack along this green line that I was showing in the previous slide. And you need to do so that you seal it, or you start the sealing from the middle of the seal and then work outwards towards the edges of the pouch. And usually it's good to do it 2 to 3 times to make sure that you have a proper seal there. With roto sealer, if you're using the heat sealer like this, then normal or recommended sealing temperatures are varying from 130 degrees to 160 degrees in Celsius. But we know that you can get a good seal in many times already at starting at 100 Celsius, so it's really depending on the sealer. Or then if we're talking in Fahrenheit, you can see the figures from the slide, but it's about 270 to 335 Fahrenheit. And you start to get a seal already there at 212. And then you can also use impulse sealer easily to seal the bag. And it's really quite easy to get a proper seal for that one. We talked about the shelf life of the wrap of the cover pack and how it is extending the shelf life. And to somehow better understand that how it could be extending it, I thought that we would need to little bit look at what kind of a shelf life you normally see for items which are only wrapped. Like if you have disposable wrapping, for example, wet laid non-woven or crepe paper or synthetic material like SMS, then usually these shelf lives that are given around the world, they are from 1 to 3 months after the sterilization. But sometimes I have seen even 12 months, 6 to 12 months for the wrapped items. So it's really depending on the country, on the hospital, what is the practice. I also wanted to mention, because seeing this linen still being used in many places, that linen and the shelf life there is very questionable. So there was already studies in 1970s that were showing presence of microbes inside the wrap bags already after 3 days when packed into the linen. And then there was a later study from Kimberly-Clark in 2006 that was showing contamination rates close to 17% when packed in linen after 3 months on the shelves. Important thing to understand with linen is that water and humidity goes through this linen immediately. So basically you can easily demonstrate this by just take a little bit of water, pour it onto the linen, and it will be going immediately through. And once the water is through, then of course the microbes can easily follow the path and go into the bag as well. Now that if you add and put the cover pack on this wrapped item, then you can usually extend the shelf life. And our recommendation from WIPAC is to follow the practices or guidelines that you have in your own country for the cover packs, that how much more shelf life you can keep for the items. As an example, in Finland there is a guideline, and in some other European countries there is a guideline that you can keep 5 years shelf life after putting this cover pack on the sterilized packs after the sterilization. It is very clear that this cover pack material is not allowing any microbe or dust or any kind of particulate to go through this material. So it doesn't matter how long it's going to stay on the shelves, then through this material you don't get any microbes or anything going, as long as you're sealing it properly. And then, as one of the things what I wanted to mention here is also that there are a lot of medical device producers who are using the same material combination for packing medical devices, like, for example, wound care products, and they are giving them sterility times up to 5 years and so on. We are actually a little bit studying this from in the hospital environment at the moment. So when we have, or starting to do it, but when we have more information, we will be sharing these things with you as well. Then how these cover packs actually reduce operation cost. I made some case calculation here. I visited one central hospital in Finland a couple of weeks back, and I got some of these values from there. So first of all, they told that they are sterilizing about 1,000 trays in a month, which is about 12,000 trays in a year. And then they did not actually follow it exactly, that what is the failure of the SPSs that they have, or how much they have expired items. They only told that they have 1 month expiry for the wrapped items after the sterilization, and they have some failures, they have some expired items, but they have not taken a note how much of those. But if there would be 2% of these failures out of the 12,000, then number of trays that they would need to reprocess in a year would be 240. And then it doesn't sound very high really as a figure. But then I also asked them to give the cost of reprocessing this one tray. So split it between the washing, autoclaving, packing, everything. And we came up to the 40 euros when adding all those together. And they told that if they are using hydrogen peroxide plasma sterilization, that would be even 10 euros higher. So about 50 euros. And then when you simply multiply this 240 trays with this 40 euros or 48 US dollars, you add up to numbers which are about 10,000 in a year. Just 2% failure. Or if expired items would be like 3% of all those, the same calculations, we would be already at 15,000. So just a more small number of trays are actually adding up to the very high costs involved. And then this is not necessarily the only cost that you have there, because then if you would have any kind of a waiting time in operating room due to the failure in sterile barrier system, then it's been said that 1 minute cost for the operation team is varying from 40 to 150 euros or 50 to 180 US dollars per minute. So 1 minute, the cost is pretty high. What about the cancellations in operations? These maybe don't happen that often, but once they happen, then the cost is obviously high. Extra days in the hospital due to the infection. I have told this before, but just to repeat, those are pretty high, from 1,000 to 4,000 euros or USD. Instrument evaluation, cost of additional inventory handling. There are a lot of different things to consider. Well, then if you are wrapping items but you would be also adding this cover pack on them. Then I took the same 12,000 trays and I made some calculations that what would be the cost if they would be wrapping or using the cover pack for 10%, 20%, 30%, 50% and 100% of these wrapped items. And then you can see figures from there. But if you would be using cover pack for the 10% of the items, the cost for the hospital would be, say, 1,000. If they would be using cover packs for 50%, it would be already 5,000. And then if they would be using cover packs for every single wrapped item, the cost would be around the same as the extra cost of reprocessing only. Then, as a distributor or salespeople, we would need to think that what is the opportunity for ourselves when we're selling these products to the hospitals. If I'm going to hospital, I would like to imagine that how much is the opportunity that I have in hand when selling this cover pack. And then evaluating this is very difficult, and the targets are different and really market related. And you would need to do the calculations yourself. But then I was a little bit thinking about it, that let's say that if an average small size hospital wrapping material consumption would be around 20,000 in a year. It doesn't matter if it's euros or USD, but about this amount. And then for the little bit bigger one, it would be 50,000 in a year. Then if you would be targeting 30% or that the 30% of the wrapped items are put into the cover packs, then the small hospital with the prices what I have been using, your opportunity would be like 3,000 in a year, and for bigger hospitals, 7,500. It still doesn't sound maybe too big, but then if you put 10 hospitals there, you already have 30,000 or 75,000. If you put 100 hospitals there, you're talking about a bigger business again. And then you don't need to target 30%. You can target also 100% wrapped items which be put into the cover packs. It's a nice opportunity. Then still shortly before stopping soon, then sustainability is one of these topics that we see hearing more and more inside the hospitals and in healthcare. And also we as a company in BIPAC, we have set very hard targets for CO2 emissions. So we want to come CO2 free, or we want to cut down our CO2 emissions by 2025 to zero. It's a hard target. Now with this cover pack, this might be a little bit artificial, but on the other hand, not. So if we take these 12,000 trays of instruments again, and then think that we would be unnecessarily reprocessing these or 5% of these trays, then it would mean that we would be washing and sterilizing and doing all these instruments again for 600 times or 600 trays in a year. And then when we remember that new washing machine is using about minimum 90 liters of water per cycle, then we can imagine that we are using a lot of water without any reason. We need detergents, we need rinsing agents. We use a lot of energy. So basically heating up water for washing, heating up for disinfection, heating up for drying. Water pumps are using electricity. Autoclave using even more electricity because they need to turn the water into the steam. There is also kind of things like HEPA filters. You need salts for the water softeners. You need all kinds of filters for reverse osmosis devices. Distillers, you need some equipment, and all these, they are needing also maintenance. So maintenance sounds like a small thing, but just the sealer maintenance can be many thousands of euros or US dollars per year for one hospital. What about autoclaves, water disinfectors, drying cabinets, ultrasonic cleaners, and all these? So actually, CoverPack, if we can reduce the number of unnecessary reprocessing, we are also reducing the energy consumption and water consumption and a lot of the use of these, kind of like salts and filters and that kind of things that you need to change for the devices. Then other uses of CoverPack, what we have seen and what we know that hospitals and other places are using. So the first one here on the list is that I have seen myself in Sweden, the big laundry, which is serving a lot of different hospitals in the area. I think 22 hospitals they serve. And what they are doing, they are simply laundering some of the clothing for the hospitals, and they are not even sterilizing them. They just do the laundry, they dry them, and then they place into the CoverPacks, seal them, and send to the hospitals. And you can imagine it's pretty big business for our distributor, and it's also nice for us as a producer. Then there are a lot of medical device producers using these CoverPacks because they can be put into the irradiation sterilization. Usually they use this mainly in internal processes, so when they sterilize something for their own needs. But there are some customers who are also packing items for sales into our CoverPacks. Then there are hospitals who are transporting dirty items from operating room to central sterilization services within our CoverPacks. The idea is to protect the surroundings from all kinds of aerosols that could be coming out from the instruments. And it's also keeping them a little bit like, let's say, a little bit wet-like kind of a thing. So it's easier to clean the instruments in CSSD once they reach that. Then we have seen a lot of sterile items packed into the CoverPacks and put into the ambulance cars because conditions there are varying a lot. Then there are many different armies around the world who are using CoverPacks for sterilized items. I know that Finnish army, for example, is putting sterilized items in the pouch and also containers into the CoverPacks and then taking those onto the field. So it's really giving this extra protection needed. The last one I haven't seen myself, but I have heard about it, so that there are some blood items which are deep frozen, and they have a primary pack, and then they put this primary pack into the CoverPack, they seal it, and then they place it into the freezer. And then we are talking about some temperatures like -60 Celsius, so pretty low temperatures what they are using. Last slide. This is what I would like you to remember from this webinar, maybe some other things as well. But basically, CoverPacks definitely has their place in hospitals or healthcare facilities. They are needed to protect the sterile barrier system and of course the sterile item when the conditions are demanding and unstable, or when those are hard to control. Sometimes it might be just very difficult to control how transporting people are, for example, educated or something. And then you need to have some protective systems in place to be on the sure side that everything is going well. I also would like you to remember that CoverPacks can really reduce the cost of operations in CSSD as well as in operating rooms. and that they can be used for many other applications than those normal ones in the hospital as well, like we saw in the previous slide. And again, I'm saying that this is pretty big business, and there are a lot of opportunities to make more sales there. Then finally, I would like to still remind that this webinar and the PowerPoint presentation is available from our web portal. So you can have access through STERIKING.com. And if you do not have access today, then please ask for the access. And then you can utilize this PowerPoint presentation. Maybe you're taking just some of the slides there and translate it to your own language. Or maybe you just want to go back to the presentation sometimes before you go into the customers. But I think it's pretty handy. You can find it there 24/7, even if we are sleeping. Then just as a first information to you, then our next webinar will be on 10th of June, and that will be mainly for people who are maintaining the sealers, but also for the salespeople who are interested in these things. So it will be heat sealer maintenance training, and then the idea is to teach how to do the most common preventive maintenance, like, for example, changing the Teflons, cleaning the heating elements, changing the transportation belts, calibrating the temperature, and that kind of a thing. So we will be sending the invitations for that webinar pretty soon, and if you cannot attend, you can always watch that from web portal later on. Now, I would like to thank you for attending today.